Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore was born to Kendra and Percival Dumbledore in the summer of 1881 in the mainly wizarding village of Mold-on-the-Wold. The early years of Dumbledore's life were marked by tragedy when his younger sister Ariana Dumbledore was attacked by a group of Muggle boys who saw her performing magic and were frightened by what they saw. Ariana was left mentally and emotionally scared by the event, and her magical powers were left severely altered and would manifest themselves on rare occasions, usually in random or destructive ways. Albus's father, Percival Dumbledore, was heartbroken and set out in search of his own brand of justice. He located the Muggle boys and attacked them, as they had his daughter. For this, Percival was sentenced to Azkaban, where he later died, choosing the sentence over explaining why he had attacked the boys, as it would have meant Ariana being taken away. To escape the accusing eyes of the wizarding world, Kendra Dumbledore moved her young family to the village of Godric's Hollow, which, like Mold-on-the-Wold, was a mainly wizarding village. Kendra rebuffed all her neighbors with the eventual exception of Bathilda Bagshot, preferring to be left alone, and Albus learned not to mention his sister or father in public. Dumbledore began to attending Hogwarts in the autumn of 1892 and was sorted into Gryffindor House. Dumbledore's first year was met with much whispering about his father's crime. Many of Albus' fellow students mistakenly believed that, like father, like son, Albus too hated Muggles. Some praised his father's actions, hoping to gain his trust, but they would not find favor with the young Dumbledore this way. Though later in his young life, under the influence of his love for Geraint Gilderwald, some anti-Muggle prejudice did develop, but he soon saw the error of his intent. He befriended a young Elphias Dodge on his first day at Hogwarts. Dodge was suffering from the aftermath of dragon pox at the time, greenish skin and pockmarks, which discouraged most from approaching him. Dumbledore, however, demonstrated his uncommon kindness and willingness to look past the surface and find inner beauty in people. Dumbledore also became very well connected during his Hogwarts years, making notable friends such as Nicholas Flamel, Bathilda Bagshot, and Griselda Marchbanks, who marked him in his NEWTS for charms and transfiguration, and later recalled that he did things with a wand that she had never seen before. He also had several of his papers published during his studies. During his school years, Dumbledore won the Barnabas Finkley Prize for exceptional spellcasting, became the British Youth Representative to the Wizarding and received the Gold Medal for groundbreaking contribution to the International Alchemical Conference in Cairo. In his third year, Dumbledore presumably took study of ancient runes and at least one other subject which is not known to be divination. During his fourth year, Dumbledore accidentally set the bed curtains in his dormitory on fire, although he admitted that he had never liked them anyways. Albus was made a prefect during his fifth year and was made head boy in his seventh year. He was considered the most brilliant student to have attended the school. After graduating from Hogwarts in June 1899, Dumbledore planned to take the traditional grand tour of the world with his friend Dodge. However, tragedy ensued on the eve of the departure when Kendra Dumbledore was killed by an outburst of Ariana's uncontrollable magic, leaving Albus the head of his own broken family. Albus returned to the Godric's Hollow full of bitter resentment at his situation, feeling trapped and wasted. Fortune finally shone on Dumbledore in the form of Gellert Grindelwald, who was in Godric's Hollow to research the Deathly Hallows. Grindelwald was as talented and brilliant as Albus was. Dumbledore quickly became fascinated by Grindelwald's ideas of wizards' domination, obviously considering Grindelwald an unexpected new chance to show his own brilliance and come out of the local misery. Albus also harbored romantic feelings for the other boy, but regretted his relationship with Grindelwald later in life. However, after 2 months, Albus's brother Aberforth confronted him over his neglect of Ariana over the past few weeks, telling him he could not carry out his plans with Grindelwald as he would have to take her with him. Grindelwald then used a Cruciatus curse on him. A violent duel erupted between the three teenage boys. Ariana herself tried to intervene in the fight, but could not due to her erratic abilities, and in the ensuing chaos was hit by a stray curse and died. No one knew whose curse it was that killed her, but Grindelwald fled immediately, as he already had a bad record back home, leaving the devastated Albus behind. Grindelwald's fight, Dumbledore returned to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry as Professor of Transfiguration. In the 1910s, Dumbledore taught Hufflepuff Newton's commander. At some point, Newt endangered a human life with a beast. Despite Dumbledore arguing on his behalf, Newt was expelled from Hogwarts. In 1926, Dumbledore became a regular columnist of Transfiguration Today, with the Daily Prophet quoting him as saying he was enraptured to be writing for the magazine. Dumbledore also served in recruiting students for Hogwarts. Most prominent among the students he recruited was Tom Riddle, who he found in Wolf's Orphanage in 1938. Alone of all the professors at Hogwarts, Dumbledore was not charmed by the natural charisma and cunning of Tom Riddle. In their first encounter, Dumbledore became immediately suspicious of his obvious instincts for cruelty, secrecy, and domination, and resolved to keep a close eye on him during his studies at the school. As Dumbledore was not so easily taken in by his charming facade, Riddle came to despise and fear him. In 1943, several Muggle-born students were mysteriously petrified by a beast rumored to have been released by the heir of Slytherin from the mystical Chamber of Secrets. Indeed, the final victim of the beast, Myrtle, was actually killed. This act seemed like to ensure the permanent closure of school, forcing Riddle to go back to the orphanage. While Dumbledore rightly suspected Riddle was behind the attacks, the asperic dark wizard expertly framed Gryffindor student Rubeus Hagrid as a perpetrator. Riddle was able to pass off Hagrid's tamed Acromantula Aragog as the best attacking students, resulting in Hagrid's explosion and ensuring that Hogwarts remained open. Dumbledore was never able to uncover hard evidence implicating Riddle. However, he nonetheless kept a very close watch over Riddle, preventing him from opening the Chamber of Secrets again during his remaining years at Hogwarts. He was also able to convince the headmaster to allow Hagrid to remain at the school as a groundskeeper in training. However, as Dumbledore was educating young wizards and witches, Gellert Grindelwald was still at large in Europe, building up an army, and had already found one of the Deathly Hallows, the Elder Wand, which he used to terrorize the continent. Dumbledore was afraid to face Grindelwald, not because he thought he could not defeat him, but because he was afraid that Grindelwald could reveal to him who had truly killed Ariana. However, by 1945, Dumbledore could no longer turn a blind eye to Grindelwald's deeds and tracked his old friend down. He dueled Grindelwald in what later became known as the most legendary duel ever fought between wizards. Dumbledore defeated Grindelwald despite his possession of Elder Wand. Grindelwald was imprisoned in Durmengard and Dumbledore kept the Elder Wand for himself. For this, Dumbledore was awarded the Order of Merlin, First Class, by Leonard Spencer in Moon's administration. However, as Dumbledore was educating young wizards and witches, Gellert Grindelwald was still at large in Europe, building up an army, and had already found one of the Deathly Hallows, the Elder Wand, which he used to terrorize the continent. Dumbledore was afraid to face Grindelwald, not because he thought he could not defeat him, but because he was afraid that Grindelwald could reveal to him who had truly killed Ariana. However, by 1945, Dumbledore could no longer turn a blind eye to Grindelwald's deeds and tracked his old friend down. He dueled Grindelwald in what later became known as the most legendary duel ever fought between wizards. Dumbledore defeated Grindelwald despite his possession of Elder Wand. Grindelwald was imprisoned in Durmengard and Dumbledore kept the Elder Wand for himself. For this, Dumbledore was awarded the Order of Merlin, First Class, by Leonard Spencer in Moon's administration. Dumbledore Dumbledore was appointed headmaster of Hogwarts sometime between March 1965 and March 1971, succeeding Armando Dippet. During this time, he was offered the position of Minister for Magic several times, but he turned down the offer every time, remembering how his quest for power had been his weakness in the past. Shortly after Dumbledore became headmaster, Tom Riddle, not known exclusively as Lord Voldemort, approached Dumbledore with the same request he had proposed to Armando Dippet before him: be allowed to return to Hogwarts as a teacher of defense against the dark arts. Dumbledore, who knew of Voldemort's illicit activities since he left Hogwarts, denied his application. This led to Voldemort cursing the position of defense against the dark arts professor, preventing anyone from holding the position for more than a single school year. When Remus Lupin became of age to attend Hogwarts, he was afraid that he would be unable to due to being infected by the werewolf Fenrir Greyback. However, Dumbledore, being fair, believes that as long as special precautions were taken, there was no reason why Remus should be deprived of his education. As such, Dumbledore prepared the Shrieking Shack as a place for Remus' monthly transformation, with the Whomping Willow as a guard. This would forever earn Dumbledore Remus's gratitude, as many other headmasters would simply forbid the boy from even setting foot into the school. When Severus Snape found out Remus's secret, Dumbledore forbade him from repeating it to anyone. After Lord Voldemort started his first rise to power in 1970, Dumbledore founded the Order of the Phoenix, a secret organization of witches and wizards willing to risk their lives to fight Voldemort and his Death Eaters. As the only wizard Voldemort was ever truly afraid of, Dumbledore was the perfect leader of the organization and was a significant contributor to the fight against the Voldemort. Later on in the war, Dumbledore was approached by another person who also wanted a job at Hogwarts, Sybil Trelawney, who applied to become the new professor of divination. Lessons that Dumbledore disliked and barely considered a part of necessary education for young wizards and witches. Dumbledore gave her a chance because she was the great-great-granddaughter of the celebrated Sir Cassandra Trelawney. To his disappointment, when he was interviewing Sybil at the Hog's Head, he came to the conclusion that she was not a real seer. However, as Dumbledore was about to leave, Trelawney fell into a real trance and made prophecy about the birth of the one that would have the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, who would be born those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7-month dice. This astonished Dumbledore, but as it turned out, the Death Eater Severus Snape had overheard most of the prophecy, but had been caught in the act of spying and ejected from the tavern by Aberforth Dumbledore. Dumbledore hired Trelawney in order to protect her from the Death Eaters. Later, Severus Snape approached Dumbledore. Having already told Voldemort about the prophecy, Snape was shocked by the fact that Voldemort had concluded that the prophecy was about Harry Potter, the son of James Potter and Snape's own loved childhood friend Lily Evans. Dumbledore made arrangements to ensure the safety of the three. He advised them to stay hidden in their house in Godric's Hollow, which was protected by a fiddler's charm. However, their secret keeper, believed by Dumbledore and everyone else to be Sirius Black, but was in truth was Peter Pettigrew, betrayed them, resulting in James and Lily's death at Voldemort's hand. However, as Voldemort attempted to murder Harry, the court backfired due to Lily Potter's love for her son and destroyed his body, only keeping a part of his soul alive. Dumbledore, who likely already knew by then that a part of Voldemort's soul had concealed itself within Harry, made sure that Harry would be kept safe with his families, the Dursleys, despite them not being selected as his guardians in the event of James and Lily's death, as his spells ensured that Voldemort could not harm Harry there as long as he could have a home with them. He convinced Snape to help him protect Harry, although Dumbledore secretly planned to allow Voldemort to kill Harry in the end, which would destroy the piece of Voldemort's soul inside Harry. However, he also hoped to influence Harry into such a person who would willingly sacrifice his life for the greater good, allowing him the chance to choose between life and death in the end. Dumbledore gave Snape employment at Hogwarts as the potion master and later defended Snape against the Ministry of Magic, who were rounding up and arresting remaining Death Eaters. Dumbledore attended many Death Eater trials, including that of the Lestranges and Barty Crouch Jr. He also witnessed Igor Karkaroff's testimony, which secured his release from Azkaban in return for the name of fellow Death Eaters. Shortly before the Potter's death, Dumbledore discovered that James' cloak of invisibility was in fact one of the Deathly Hallows. Although Dumbledore had long given up his desire to unite the Hallows to become the Master of Death, he could not resist the thought of studying the cloak. To that end, he borrowed it from James while James and Lily were in hiding. He confirmed that it was indeed the Cloak of Legend, but before he could return it, James and Lily were killed by Voldemort. The unfortunate occurrence provided Dumbledore with ownership of two of